What's the difference between business in Islam and modern day capitalist business? In modern capitalist firms, you create a service to maximize profit. Islam flips it. In Islam, you create profits to serve society. It's unfortunate that we as believers have lost this moral vision of business. But how did we lose it? Why did we start to imbibe a distorted worldview when it all became about maximizing profits? Over the last 5 centuries, the modern world began to be shaped entirely through a Eurocentric idea of knowledge and power. At their peak, the European empires conquered nearly 85% of the globe, destroying and marginalizing cultures, institutions, many of the great institutions that the Islamic world had, and knowledge systems that had guided societies for centuries were lost. So they built a new world in their image. And even after their political power declined after the Second World War, their intellectual power remained. We are still educated within the same framework today. And this worldview essentially rests on two foundational assumptions. The first is that Western civilization is the most advanced and represents the apex of human progress. Therefore, progress means becoming more like the West. And number two, Western knowledge is superior, even to divine revelation. From this foundation, new theories of human nature and society began to form. And one of the most influential Western philosophers was René Descartes, who turned knowledge on its head. He made the famous statement, "I think, therefore I am." Some of you may have heard of this before. And Descartes, through this statement, he shifted the foundation of certainty from revelation to human reason. He started to pave the way for rationalism, secularism, and the Western belief that knowledge can stand independent of God. And interestingly, I actually think he was a believer, but he completely transformed the way in which people think about the universe and God. But this shift was later compounded by the likes of Charles Darwin, right, his theory of evolution or survival of the fittest, which became a metaphor for society itself. Life is competition, not cooperation. And cooperation is imperative within the Quran. And eventually, even the moral teachings of religion were inverted. The Bible had taught that the love of wealth is the root of all evil. Islam, of course, has more nuance to this, and we can discuss it separately. But modern thinkers like George Bernard Shaw flipped the script, and he's attributed to have said that the lack of wealth was the root of all evil. So we can start to see the change in how society began to see wealth and business because of these thinkers who emerged. So we can see that in economics and business, this turned into the pursuit of maximizing profit and pleasure, or hedonism, what we now call utility. But by the 20th century, the famous economist Milton Friedman, he claimed that the only responsibility of business is to maximize profits for its shareholder. In other words, the role of business is simply just to make money. All of this that I've shared with you is a simplified version of history. There's a lot more to it, but it's enough to see the assumptions beneath how we work today. Business in the 20th century, as we've seen over the past 100 years, became a point of deep departure from the worldview of Islam. Islam has its own worldview of how we see things, in which business is a path to God and to spiritual ascendancy. So the prophetic teaching is that entrepreneurs, business people, who take their spirituality and ethics seriously have a direct route to paradise. As the Prophet, peace be upon him, famously said, "The honest and trustworthy trader is with the prophets and with the truthful and with the martyrs." Business became, and often still is today, not a place of truth, virtue, safety, and wealth for the sake of goodness, but simply a mechanism for maximizing profits for the sake of self-interest. So when public outrage began to grow over the last 30 to 40 years with corporate corruption and deceit and exploitation, with big pharma just creating addictive products and marketing them out, and all sorts of scandals, oil scandals and so on, then a new term was invented to soften the corporate image, which was taking a really bad hit. And we've all heard of this term CSR, corporate social responsibility. The Quran, by contrast, begins with a completely different vision of the human being. And it's important we understand the Quranic vision for the human being and business and then wider society. Quran recognizes the inherent dignity of every soul. لَقَدْ كَرَمْنَا بَنِي Adam, as the Quran says, that we've dignified the human being, the son of Adam, who's been created for God for divine transcendent purpose. Each of us has been given unique talents. And in fact, Surah Al-Isra talks about this idea of having your own shakla, your own unique disposition. These are to be used in the service of good. We just have to discover these and then to reflect God's light in the world through these gifts that we've been given. And what better place to begin to spread our talents and our gifts than where we spend most of our waking life, at work and business. We spend most of our life going to work, doing work, thinking about work. And God created us, and this is fundamental. We read this in Surah Al-Baqarah, that God created us as his representatives or as ambassadors, as khulafa, right? Inni ja'ilun fil ardi khalifa, to reflect in our own limited human capacity his divine names and attributes so that we can come to know him on earth. In fact, the verse in the Quran, وَمَا خَلَقْتُ الْجِنَّ وَالْإِنسَ إِلَّا لِيَعْبُدُونَ, Ibn Abbas, the great interpreter of the Quran, says that إِلَّا لِيَعْبُدُونَ, to worship God, in reality means إِلَّا لِيَعْرِفُونَ, to come to know God. Okay, so business in the religious worldview is seen as a path to God, a place of cooperation. And Imam Muhammad al-Shaybani talks about this in Kitab al-Kasb, that we all depend on each other. We all have to cooperate with each other in order for this microphone, the materials had to be made by somebody, but somebody had to find the materials and somebody had to assemble it. Somebody had to transport it, right? Everyone has to work together. Imam Ghazali talks about this in his book as well, book 13 of the Ihya, cooperating with each other. This idea of lita'arifu, right? So getting to know one another through business is really important. But all of this starts on the inside. Okay, so when we do business, most of us just think about the world outside and what we need to engage with, but actually it starts with our internal reality. Okay, so we need to reflect on what we are doing and why, not just like going about business mindlessly and just trying to earn money. Like, think about, what is the purpose of you doing your business? What are you trying to achieve? What is your mission? This renewal that we need to engage in doesn't begin with like changing systems and stuff like that. It begins with correcting ourselves. The first step is self-improvement, tazkiyah, of purification and growth, right? This inner transformation to purify our intentions and align our earnings with our ethics. And to do this, we have to take just one step at a time. Don't try to take on too much. And just remember that business is not just for material gain, it's our path to God. So I hope you benefited from this video. Feel free to check out the other videos on my channel. Feel free to subscribe. And a lot of these teachings actually were from Professor Asad Zaman, who's an economist. You can check out his work, and in fact, we'll link to a video of his where you can learn more about this. Thank you for listening. Assalamu alaikum.